Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox Reviews, and thank you for logging on. We're waking up with watches. As ever, everything you see on the table is for sale and in stock. Names, references, and pricing in the description below. And I have a direct purchase and pricing inquiry email for those of you who want to ask questions about these watches. Pursuant to purchase, tmosso at thewatchbox.com, direct from you to me and my hand-picked crew. Let's jump straight in. First and foremost, the only Omega on the table is an Olympian, dedicated to the Apollo 8 mission of December 1968. This is a model that came out in 2018. This is the Omega Speedmaster Moon Watch, Dark Side of the Moon, Apollo 8, the mission that arced around the dark side of the moon. Now, the watch is special in every way, starting with the case. It's the Dark Side of the Moon ceramic case that debuted in 2013, 44.25 millimeters in diameter. The watch is feather light because of its ceramic composition and also robustly resistant to scratches. You have a sapphire crystal on this one, and you can see Omega has finished the ceramic with the same polished and satin facets as you would get on steel or precious metal. Now we move inboard, and you can see the tachymeter scale itself is fully loomed. Not only is the tachymeter fully loomed, even the crown itself features a Luminova insert. Moving further inboard, you can see that the hour indices themselves are cantilevered over the laser ablated, evacuated, and open-worked center dial. Note that there is a racing style staggered checker for the minutes and seconds. The chronograph functions feature a yellow varnished set of hands for seconds, minutes, and hours, and then you have that partially evacuated dial that allows you to even see part of the way through the watch, laser ablated to create the surface of the moon on your wrist. Now you turn it all over, by the way, let's take a look at the strap. As you can see, it has yellow highlights inside of its perforated leather, lovely yellow contrasting stitch. The watch impressively includes a full ceramic pin and buckle, so even this component, normally black titanium or steel on most ceramic watches, even this component is scratch resistant like the ceramic case. Flip it all upside down and you can see that there is a caliber 1869, which is basically, and I mean basically mechanically, the moon watch caliber. And I'm going to get a little bit closer, and Andrew's going to improve the focus. We're going to take a closer look here. So it is the moon watch caliber, manual wind, 21.6 beat rate, cam and lateral clutch, 48-hour power reserve, 19 joules here, but you can see that it features the same laser ablation technique used on the dial to recover some of the impression that the astronauts would have noted as they orbited the dark side of the moon, that moon-like surfacing. You also have lovely polished, beveled, and satin-topped steel chronograph yoke and levers. So you have a combination of black and satin-finished steel. It is aesthetically finished the high standard of the open caseback 1863 Moonwatch caliber, but with very distinctive, unique bridges, levers, yoke, and plate. Throw it on the wrist, and again, I said it was a featherlight watch. That holds up. Only about 50 millimeters from lug to lug. The watch wears easily because it's short across the wrist, it's broad, and it is light. It's not terribly thick either, and as you could see, it would easily fit underneath a jacket, cuffs, even a couple of tight dress sleeves. So while the watch is certainly a little bit brash with its all-black evacuated dial aesthetic, nevertheless, this is a timepiece you could wear full-time and quite comfortably. We may as well lead off with some heavy hitters. From the Apollo 8, we jump straight to the world of Patek Philippe, and this is one you're going to want to see. This is the first example I have encountered. New for 2019, this is the Patek Philippe Calatrava weekly calendar. The 5212A, 40 millimeters in stainless steel. You can see it has those glorious fluted caseband and lugs. Note the presence of a dial with the weeks of the year, all 52 of them indicated by a radial indicator. You'll also note blackened white gold Dauphine style hands and blackened indices, and you can see the weeks, or I should say the days of the week. You have the weeks outboard, and then you have the days of the week inboard. And if you take a quick look at this watch, you're going to love the fact that the handwriting is designed to evoke a specific Patek Philippe employee who effectively won an office contest to feature on the dial. So this is designed to evoke his handwriting and the characters of the letters as he forms them, to give it a little bit of a warmer vintage appearance and feel. Now, I'll also showcase perhaps the most interesting technical innovation here, which is the hacking seconds function, as the basic movement is the new automatic 26330 SCJSE with hacking seconds and the weekly calendar function. Throw this watch on the wrist, it's low slung, it's comfortable. I want to say it's the reference 2405 that inspires the lugs of this case, and you can see how they arc around the wrist. This is anything but a Nautilus. Though stainless steel and 40 millimeters, the watch has a look and a versatile aesthetic all of its own, and unlike the Omega, this one is absolutely perfect for tight sleeves or dress cuffs. French cuffs, bring it on, but in stainless steel, this could also be your sports casual watch. A lovely piece and one of the most unusual, intriguing, and original Patek aesthetic efforts since the 5235G regulator. Now let's jump into more Patek Philippe splendor with a 2018 launch that I believe is one of Patek's finest chronographs of the 2010s. Now this is the Salmon Dial Platinum Patek Philippe 5270P, the first Platinum 5270 with the Salmon Dial. It's a killer combination. 41 millimeters, you could see lugs that somewhat echo the old 1579 chronographs as they are dramatically fluted and stepped out from the caseband. You can note that there is a sharp stepped and conical bezel that abuts the crystal itself, and the caseband itself is relatively slim. You can see down at 6 o'clock between the lugs the top Vesselton diamond, brilliant cut to remind you that this is a platinum Patek Philippe, matching platinum deployant clasp. The dial in that lovely rose gold-like salmon with blackened white gold indices at the bottom and white gold Arabic numerals vertically arrayed at the top with foy or leaf style hands. You have a moon phase indicator that's coaxial with the date indicator, and then you've got your chronograph. It is a perpetual calendar chronograph. You'll note, if you rewind 5 or 6 seconds, the instantaneous jump of the minute counter. With the perpetual calendar, you are ready for February 29th, 2020. Turn it all over, and as you can see, there have been some changes made to protect innocent parties, but you can still see that the caliber 29535 is an absolute monster. 65-hour manual wind power reserve, 4 Hz beat rate, stop seconds, instantaneous jumping minutes. You have a column wheel and a lateral clutch, which is fully jeweled, a handmade Breguet overcoil hairspring, free sprung and adjusted in 6 positions. It is the bee's knees. Throw it on the wrist and you can see it is also quite wearable. Though a substantial watch by Patek historical standards, it's not overwhelming by any means. My wrist is 16 centimeters circumference and I'm having no trouble whatsoever wearing this timepiece. Guaranteed to run no worse than -3 + 2 seconds from the factory and still under warranty. This is a precision instrument in every respect. And the moon phase need be adjusted only once every 122 years. So you have a watch that is accurate both to the century and to the second. Flip it one more time. Andrew's doing a great job with that camera. Keep on trucking, my man. And you can see the combination of Côte de Genève, satin finish, mirrored beveling, black polished screws, and engine-turned perlage. Now, many watches have these. It's the degree and the quality that sets a Patek Philippe flagship complication apart. And that you can only appreciate in person. That said, there are those for whom 41 millimeters, precious metal, salmon dial, and complicated is just too much, too outlandish, too brash, too contemporary, and those antiquarians will love the Series 3 Patek Philippe 3970P. This is a 3rd series dial with dart style indices, and as you can see, the baton style hands. Black in a 36.2 millimeter platinum case. The timepiece features the characteristic combination of lateral hallmarking on the lugs and the Series 3 dial that was characteristic of mid to late 90s builds, and this one has a warranty card dated 1998, so that is the time frame. Now this is also a perpetual calendar chronograph, but you'll note a very different machine. Inside this 36.2 millimeter case, we have a Lemania 2310 Bausch doing business as the highly modified Patek Philippe CH2770. Now, as the Omega 321, this went to the moon. As the Patek 2770, it features unrivaled splendor. Finished to the same high standards as the 29535 you just saw. It is a traditional Lemania Bausch substantially improved by Patek, improved with a fully jeweled lateral clutch. 5-position chronometer style adjustment, free sprung balance with an overcoil hairspring made by hand, and of course Geneva hallmark finish. That is one thing the newer watch cannot match. Will both feature the same standard of finish, only one bears the imprimatur of traditional Canton and City of Geneva fine finish, and it is the watch right here. Now the watch features an optional full platinum deployant clasp. Well, this would have been standard on Series 4. This is a Series 3 with the optional opt-up platinum clasp, so that's a nice feature to have on a watch that would have originally included a pin buckle. Throw the watch on the wrist, and as you can see, easy to wear. and handsome, comfortable and compact, only 43.5 millimeters lug to lug, and I get a real rush out of wearing this watch because it's a little giant, discreet, handsome, with the white metal and the black dial, a sporty timepiece that can be worn casually. Though I'm dressed up a little bit, you can easily dress this one down, and not being particularly large, nor Rolex, it's not going to elicit questions about its authenticity, its price, or where you got it, unless, of course, you encounter another enthusiast who will see right through the small stature and the discreet branding on the dial. This is a watch for connoisseurs and those who truly love mechanical horology. Also a perpetual calendar and ready for February 29th. Now, from the world of Patek Philippe, I think we need to jump back to something a little bit more elemental, and then we'll get back into Patek on the sports watch side of things. But it's important to note that FP Journe, also of Geneva, an upstart compared to Patrician Patek, which dates back to 1839 as Japek and Cie. Japek, Patek, and Cie, far older than FP Journe. Now, this is a model launched as part of the Journe Octa Sport collection back in 2012. These are the aluminum models, made from 2012, discontinued to 2014, I should say. The 42mm aluminum watch was difficult to make, expensive, and time-consuming. Therefore, it was discontinued for the more series-viable titanium cases. So 42mm in aluminum, this watch is absolutely feather light. Now, it has a 120-hour power reserve, but truth be told, it will run for 5 days is its chronometric power reserve. You have a lovely dark gray dial, you have a power reserve indicator, a double-digit date, an AM/PM indicator, and a lovely little sapphire constant seconds, fully loomed with radially arrayed Arabic numerals. The watch is nice and thin with rubber bumpers to help avoid scuffing of the case. Now, the interesting thing about these watches is that they didn't just include aluminum cases, they included full aluminum movements. That means bridges and plates. Now, it's true the titanium watches have that as well, but these are double aluminum and thus more collectible. As relatively rare watches, not only were they only made for about 2.5 years, but FP Journe was building a smaller proportion of its total output as sports watches back then, whereas today it's probably inching toward 50-50 out of its total output of 900 pieces. As you can see, a lovely rivet-style attachment of the winding mass to the rotor. It's designed to have a little bit of a techno-industrial look, free-sprung, nicely finished, all aluminum, and beaten away at 21.6. It is a sports watch movement inside a sports watch case. Now, I'm going to throw it on the wrist, and you'll note that this is a relatively compact watch. Though a 42, because of the lugless profile, it wears a lot smaller than that. And as you can see, being nice and trim, FP Journe used to be all about thin watches before he wasn't anymore. It will easily fit underneath the cuff, and just like a Rolex or an Omega sports watch, there's no reason you can't wear this with formal attire or a suit. You'll note how much clearance I have with the straps splaying out on both sides of my wrist. So this is an easy one to wear, and again, double aluminum with a rubber strap. This is a very, very light watch. Barely 2 ounces, or about 56 grams. Now we're going to jump to a timepiece that represents outstanding value in sports watches. We haven't priced this one yet, but it's coming, and it's going to be well under $10,000, probably about half that. But launched in 2005, we're going to cross the border to Saxony. This was the Glashutte Original Sport Evolution Panodate, 42 millimeters in stainless steel, a 200-meter dive watch from Saxony with an all-metal, relieved, polished, and media-blasted diving bezel with luminescent pearl. You can line up that luminescent pearl with the minute hand, and now you have an impromptu 0 to 60-minute timer. Forget the chronograph, go with this. Dive watches are easier to read. The dial features multiple layers of nuance, from the rhodium-plated and diamond-polished indices to the double finish of the dial with concentric circular guilloche and then a sunray motif inboard in a lovely anthracite or slate gray coloration with a few well-chosen red shocks. Note the double-digit date. It does have a quick-set caliber 39 present and correct inside the case. What you'll also note is that the watch features a cambered caseback with a curved sapphire to allow you to appreciate the caliber 39, and it is a caliber 39-42 inside. Manufacture movement, 40-hour power reserve, black polished swan's neck with a solar spiral hand-finished reduction wheel. You can see it on the winding system. I'm trying to show it, but I'll see what I can do to get some light on that movement. You can see it just underneath the rotor. This is a beautifully made movement that is distinctively German, and as you can see, 200 meters water resistant with a cambered case back. It fits easily on the wrist. I should also mention that the bracelet itself is very much like what you'll find on the current Lange Odysseus, right down to the quick adjustment system, which is identical and made by the same company. So German sports watches existed long before the Odysseus, and this is a great way to get into a largely handmade watch. If you look at the bracelet, it is built like a battleship anchor. You can see the countersink of the interlocking components so that there is no visible gap. There is no daylight showing through this bracelet, which feels as solid as the Rocky Mountains. You'll note every individual link is removable, and there is a push-button adjustment system inside the clasp that allows you to make 10 millimeters of adjustment in 1 millimeter increments. You can see the sliding rack system internally. It is a beautifully detailed system that feels as solid as the bracelet itself. Throwing it on the wrist one more time, note how distinctive the crown guard structure is, as the guards themselves are held on by screws and removable should they ever be damaged in the line of duty. You'll note the watch fits easily on my wrist, arcing around the edges, and I can tell you that the heft of this watch on the wrist compared to a 2005 Rolex Submariner, there is no comparison. This is a true high luxury product. Sticking with Geo for a minute, but staying with sports watches as well. This is a watch that came out 7 years ago, and I feel like we don't discuss it often enough. Again, there were sports watches in Germany before the Odysseus, luxury sports watches as well. Now, the timepiece you see here used to be known as the Senator 70s. Now it's known as the Vintage 70s Pano Date. It has that 70s inspired full bracelet integrated lug and case profile, but remember, these came out 7 years ago. They were not copying the Nautilus look, nor were they attempting to jump onto a fad. They were ahead of the curve with an explosive dial that's everything from silver to lilac to mauve and all colors, textures, and tones in between. It is made in the Pforzheim dial manufacturer of Glashutte Original, so they are creating every part of this watch. Throw it on the wrist, and the nice thing is, you can see they kept the push-button slider from the old Sport Evolution. So too did they keep the all-sizable bracelet. Now it's a new design, but the same full-sizable, all-links removable technology obtains. Throw it on the wrist, you can see it is thinner than the Sport Evo Diver. Broad, but not too broad. Imposing, but not outlandish. This is a timepiece with a lot of color and character, and still 100 meters water resistant. Inside caliber GUB 39 still ticking away. A reliable manufactured German caliber that is nicely made, as handsomely made as the dial, and as solidly made as the case and the bracelet. This watch feels as special as the Sport Evo on the wrist. Now, let's say you've got more money to play in the sports watch category, and let's say nothing but Swiss will do. Let's go back to Geneva and let's talk about the Patek Philippe Nautilus annual calendar. Now, this is the model that came out in 2012 with the silver dial. So this is the model 57261A010, 40.5 millimeters. It features blackened indices and hands, which makes it easier to read than the standard gray dial or the blue dial version that came after. The watch is still 120 meters water resistant, and being an annual calendar, it features the complication that Patek Philippe invented first in the industry back in 1996. Combining the annual calendar with the Nautilus shape gives you the ultimate distinctive Patek Philippe timepiece, the best inside and out. The Gente design from 1976 and the annual calendar from 1996. Throw it on the wrist and, well, frankly, it wears well. It's not as big as you might think, though it does feel a little bit like an offshore version of a Nautilus, as the offshores to the Royal Oak, the 5726 and the 5980 are to the Nautilus, but it's still narrower across the wrist than any offshore, and it's a viable watch with a cuff because it's not that thick, slipping easily underneath a dress sleeve. This is a timepiece that is a sports watch through and through. Automatic, water-resistant, steel, full bracelet, and loomed. Nevertheless, with the silver dial, it's got a little bit more versatility, character, and maybe even a little bit more tropical warmth for those southern climates like my old home of Miami, where it's appropriate to have a little bit more color, a little bit more warmth and radiance in your everyday watch. Sticking with Patek and getting a little bit warmer still, we speak of the Aquanaut, but as we rarely see it in rose gold. Now, the Aquanaut
The 5167 is a handsome watch, but it's often poo-pooed as a baby Nautilus. But in rose gold, the watch comes into its own with an explosive brown bronze dial that's a gradient fade from that bronze or brown gold that's centered almost black at its outer edges. Rose gold hands, rose gold applique indices, 40 millimeters in diameter and only about 8.5 millimeters thick. The watch has broad and strong lug profiles that are more sharply defined than the integrated lugs that you see on the Nautilus. So you have a little bit more strength across the wrist, a lovely geosphere cut composite rubber strap to match the geosphere dial itself. Throwing it on the wrist, it features the caliber 324 inside, meaning it's a reliable and tough automatic, nice and thin, still 120 meters water resistant. This watch has a lot of personality. Full gold, full bracelet would be overpowering, but on the strap, it's a perfect tandem of high-class materials and base-level materials. The contrast between them, the thematic juxtaposition of rubber and gold, absolutely awesome. And with a full deployment clasp, I have to say, I actually like the clasp you get on the Aquanaut better than the clamshell locking system on the Nautilus. Sticking with Geneva, sticking with high horology, but jumping over to one of Patek Philippe's historic competitors, we speak of the Deep Stream variant of the overseas chronograph. 42.5 millimeters, this is the Deep Stream, so noted because it was called as much during development at Vacheron in Geneva. 42.5 millimeters in steel, the bezel itself is media blasted or matte finished titanium, so you have a lovely contrast between the blue-gray titanium and the silver of the steel case. Now the watch is about 50.7 millimeters from lug to lug, but you can see how the lugs downturn sharply around the wrist, and you can see the quality of the assembly as bars and screws fix the strap to the case rather than conventional spring bars. Because of the shape of the lugs and the cushion profile, which is derived from the 1977 Jörg Heissig designed Model 222, the watch has an historic look that is of the 70s but very contemporary, as the overseas chronograph Generation 2 bowed in 2004. Again, this model with the strap and the bimetallic case arrived in 2010. Easy to wear on a small wrist, it's also a full-fledged sports watch, anti-magnetic to 25,000 ampere per meter because of a soft iron inner Milgauss-like case, and 150 meters water resistant. Turn it over, you can actually see that the case back features several different levels of finish. You have radial satin grain, I'll turn that right side up, radial satin grain on the chapter ring surrounding the vessel. You have a chiseled base underneath the vessel and the C in polished relief, and then a circumferential satin grain around the edge of the case back. And again, because of the soft iron inner cage, it is a solid case back, but what sits inside is a Frédéric Piguet 1185, a fine high horology, 5-position adjusted column wheel vertical clutch automatic integrated architecture chronograph caliber that is largely hand finished before being adjusted in 5 positions at Vacheron, all of which is to say it is a high horology watch with a high horology movement. Most people think that the chronograph was the defining model of the second generation and the double-digit date was its signature. Lost on the Generation 3, so too was the loss of the oversized chronograph minutes counter, which you'll note is larger than constant seconds in chronograph hours because it's natural. It would be more readily apparent and necessary as we tend to measure things of relatively short duration with our chronographs. There's a lovely chapter ring which unites the bezel with the base of the dial, white gold hands and indices, and a sort of anthracite slate metallic sunburst pattern. Screw down crown and pusher with the Maltese cross motif cut into their profiles. A very, very special watch. And again, that watch at about $14,000 is only a few $100s more than a new Rolex Daytona. If you bought a Rolex Daytona new, you could have a Vacheron. And yes, I understand you could go and sell that Rolex for more money, but I'm an enthusiast. I buy watches to own them, and I happen to believe that you buy the watch you love, not the watch you think someone else will love. If you're a flipper, a speculator, you may think differently, but we're all watch fans on this channel, and I like to say, this is where you buy to own and buy to love. Now let's talk a little bit about more accessible watches for a moment, because I always like to bring in a few that are different from the general presentation. I don't like every watch to be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And launched in 2016, the Tudor Heritage Black Bay, this model known as the Black Bay Blue, launched in 16, is a lovely deluxe in-house caliber no-nonsense diver. Now it is a very simple timepiece outwardly, as it features a no-guard profile reminiscent of, for instance, a Tudor Submariner 7922, 23, or 24, but it also features the 7924 Big Crown profile. You'll also see that on Rolex 6538s. You'll see that on Rolex 6200s. You'll see it on the 5510s. And so this watch is really an homage to both Rolex and Tudor heritage, as there was a period when they shared bracelets and cases. And as you can see, the bracelet is designed in the rivet style that would have featured by Rolex manufacture on both Rolex and Tudor watches in the 50s and 60s. The cases were made by Rolex back in the day. And of course, Tudor shared an aesthetic. You'll also note that it's a little bit of a pastiche, as we have a late 60s to mid 70s snowflake style dial with the hands in particular referencing those later Tudor Submariners. Then we have the Big Crown no guard profile without a date, which is reminiscent of the earlier watches. 200 meters with a unidirectional rotating dive bezel and a nice crisp unidirectional rotating ratchet. Take a listen. It's chunkier than a Rolex, but it's just as precise. Now, the watch being powered by a manufacturer movement MT5602, 3-day power reserve chronometer certification, stop seconds, free sprung, 5-position adjustment, full balance bridge for shock resistance, and of course, COSC certified. This watch has got it all. Throw it on the wrist. And I should mention a little bit of Black Bay history. The Black Bay was launched back at Basel World in 2012. 3 years later, it started to get manufacturer movements, and in 2016, the model you see here was launched. A handsome piece and a true diver that is contemporary and a contemporary classic in its own right. It draws on Tudor and Rolex history without being slavish to such. It does have an identity of its own. As I like to say, it stands on its own 4 lugs. There will be a time in the future, 20, 30 years down the line, when we speak of the Black Bay as a classic and a collectible in its own right. Now, speaking of Rolex, I think it's always important that we mention the Crown brand on the show, because a lot of people are Rolex fans, and I always say you respect or you love Rolex. If you really know the brand, you respect it or you love it. The haters tend to be the sophomoric types. Now, this is a 5-digit Z series, so late production 5-digit 16610 Submariner. So we've got some of the hallmarks of a later production watch. Of course, we've got the solid lug profiles without any perforations. We've got the 93250 bracelet with these solid end links. And of course, being a newer watch, the condition overall is going to be a lot better than most of the older 5 digits. When you're talking about something from 1988, 1990, you're talking about a vintage watch. When you talk about a Z series, you're talking about a watch from 07, which means it's been minimally refinished and well treated in its relatively short life. It's easier to document a newer watch. Black lacquer dial, white gold hands indices, still 300 meters water resistant, but it does wear very differently. It's an interesting transitional period for the Sub, as we now have the solid end links, but we don't have the super case. You can see across the wrist, the watch is a lot more reasonable in size than the super case, which is a 40, but it wears like a 42. Now, I say if you can wear one, you can wear the other, but there are going to be folks who prefer a traditionally constructed Rolex 5-digit case, and for those, there is the 16610. This is a lovely piece and a great way to get into modern Rolex with a little bit of the look, the feel, and the soul of vintage. And of course, a Luminova era dial, you have no issues with tritium or concerns about replacement. Now, this is the prior generation Rolex Cosmograph Daytona. This is the 116523. This was replaced in 2016 by the 503, and the easiest way to tell the difference between them is you can see the dot indices next to the individual numerals. That turned into triangular wedge indices in 2016. This is a lovely and rich watch that combines the silver and yellow gold combo of traditional two-tone steel gold with Cornish colors, or Steelers colors, depending on your perspective. You've got the black and the gold, fully loomed, 3-day power reserve, vertical clutch column wheel, manufacturer caliber 4130 inside, 100 meters water resistant. You throw this one on the wrist, and by the way, the Daytona remains the winner's gift at the 24 Hours of Daytona, which just concluded in January. The winning driver, each winning driver in each class winning car receives one of these, and in recent years Rolex has been handing out the two-tone model. A lovely way to get into modern Rolex for around $15,000. These are a much better buy than the full steel or steel ceramic watches, as you're getting just as much quality, style, precision, heritage, and integrity, but you're getting a somewhat less common look that you're less likely to see around your office, and you're not paying a king king's ransom for the piece, as this same watch in full steel or steel ceramic might cost $25,000. This would be my choice. I actually like the look of steel gold and the warmth that that small amount of yellow gold brings to the table. So if you're thinking about getting into a Cosmograph, you love the history of motor racing, and this watch is rife with it, having originally been named Le Mans before it was renamed Daytona. That is a great way to get in, and personally, I think if you love the Daytona, it's best to just get in and enjoy, rather than wait 2 years or save up indefinitely to own the steel model. The two-tone, in my opinion, is an underrated watch with some headroom to grow, whereas I think the market for the steel and steel ceramic watches is overheated and looks a little bit more like a bubble. Now, talking about a watch that's reasonably priced, we talked about Tudor, but what if you want high horology? Well, Jaeger LeCoultre gives you that. A model launched in 2010. This is the Master Chronograph, and my God, is this a gorgeous watch. About 12.6 millimeters thick by 40 millimeters in diameter, this is a handsome manufacture movement chronograph, stainless steel, nice and slender, graceful case profile, and you can see it features a full Jaeger LeCoultre factory bracelet. JLC makes its cases, its movements, its bracelets, and its clasps. And you can see there's a combination in this 5-link bracelet of satin finish and polish. When you open up the clasp, which is quadruple trigger and double deployment, you can see there is an easy link like quick adjustment system that's built in, and you can use that to take in or take out 1.5 millimeters on each side. I believe it's 1.5 or 2 millimeters. So each side has a micro adjustment. It is an over-engineered clasp that is secure to a fault on the wrist. The watch, featuring a manufacture movement, by the way, let's take a quick look at the case back. The caliber 751/A has been through the Master 1000 Hours control test of precision, winding efficiency, power reserve, shock resistance, and of course, water resistance. Throw it on the wrist, this thing is stunning. I was talking about not paying the king's ransom for a steel Daytona. Heck, forget the Daytona. Get this. If you want to get into a watch that is handmade for under $10,000 from a truly great brand, the watchmaker's watchmaker, La Grande Maison of Le Sentier, this is the way to do it. The movement, vertical clutch column wheel, free sprung, 65-hour power reserve, 2 barrels, a hairspring designed by JLC and made by Lange, laser welded at the stud and the collet for shock resistance, unidirectional winding with ceramic rotor bearings for greater winding efficiency, and a solid 50 meters of water resistance. So while it's not, strictly speaking, a sports watch, it is a very sporty watch. So you can go Daytona, or for roughly $7,000 less, you can go JLC. Great choices to have. Now let's see, what have I missed? Oh, it looks like I've missed a whole pile of FP Journe. I know it's a bit of a house favorite here, and since Brian's show hasn't been on recently, I know you're probably aching for your Journe fix, and allow me to facilitate. Launched in 2015, this is the FP Journe Quantieme Perpetuel, a timepiece 40 millimeters in rose gold with rose gold dial. It's actually a dial with 3 primary components: a silvered outer portion, a rose gold center, and then a black polished screw fixed bezel on the inside. You have a quick set system to adjust the day as well as the date. 120 hours of power reserve claimed. FP Journe now admitting the watch will run for more like 160, and you have a brilliant hidden adjustment mechanism for the month, and you can see how it is a small trigger that actually pulls out from underneath the lug at approximately 130 and allows you to toggle the month. FP Journe wanted a seamless watch without any ugly pusher correctors evident in the case profile, and without any requirement that you use some sort of a tool to set the calendar. It is a radical perpetual calendar, and of course we're approaching February 29th, so you will want to have this watch on your wrist for Perpetual Calendar Day. Rose gold on the outside and rose gold on the inside, caliber 1303, free sprung, 5-position adjusted, advertised 120, factual 160-hour power reserve, 18-karat rose gold bridges and plates, 22-karat rose gold winding rotor. Throw it on the wrist. The watch is only 48 millimeters lug to lug, and it wears compact and it wears flat. Like I said, FP Journe used to be about flat, thin watches, and this watch was that. I was actually fortunate to encounter him back in 2015. Earlier in the year, he was wearing one of his final prototypes of the watch, and I got a little explanation. I gave him my JLC complex calendar. It was a complex calendar, but not a perpetual, and he appreciated mine, and I appreciated his, and it was a wonderful exchange between connoisseurs. So while I often crack some jokes at the guy's expense, because he's not necessarily the most gregarious dude, he loves watches. And on that level, I can totally relate. Now jumping to something that's maybe a little bit more special, if not more complicated, this is the FP Journe Octa Automatique Reserve Nacre dial. This is a timepiece with a cadran made out of mother of pearl, a lovely blue tinted mother of pearl with blue characters. The watch features a lovely combination of a silvered center and a mother of pearl hour and minute track. Now this is a boutique exclusive. This series launched back in 2012, 40 millimeters in platinum. This one has a nice mass to it. Turn the watch over and while mechanically it's identical, you've got the same movement, the same rose gold, the same power reserve, free sprung architecture, and 5-position adjustment, but it's really the dial that brings this one out. There are far more of the black dial rose gold boutique exclusives than there are of the Nacre dial watches. This is a timepiece above and beyond. If you want exclusivity, rare beauty, if you want FP Journe through and through, a watch that really embodies the man's particular aesthetic sensibility about dials and design. Remember, he designs the dial before any other part of the watch, and this is emblematic of his lateral, shall we say, left and right field thinking, because most folks would not do this on a men's watch, and those who attempt it would not pull it off. But on an FP Journe, it seems raffish, stylish, bold, and again, triumphant. This is a watch that just works on every level, from one of the hottest brands and rising in the market today. A very special piece, and I think this is probably the FP Journe on the table that I would choose for myself from amongst today's inventory if there were not one more ready to go. But before we move in that direction, let's take a flight to Schaffhausen. From Western Switzerland and French Switzerland, we now move to Eastern Switzerland and German-speaking Switzerland. It's easy to forget in the watch hobby that most Swiss speak German, not French. And in Schaffhausen, most of them speak German at IWC, but a small and elite cadre work at Moser, vertically integrated with the ability to make everything from their cases to their hairsprings to their regulators to their balances. Moser builds the entire watch, and this is a model launched 2 years ago. This is the Pioneer Center Second, 42.8 millimeters with a blue fume dial that fades from lovely metallic cobalt to black at its edge. This is a 42.8 millimeter steel, 120 meter water-resistant sports watch with Moser's signature evacuated lugs with lovely coining or striations inside. You can see the arc of the lugs to wrap over the wrist and the bubble-like profile of the sapphire over the dial. The dial, all applique indices, lovely elongated and accentuated leaf-style hands with lume, automatic winding, HMC 200 caliber inside, magic lever. The watch features a wonderful 3-day reserve, 120 meter water resistance, distinctive double-crested Côte de Genève and black polished screws, and of course that fume dial that is distinctively Moser. A full vulcanized rubber strap, and you'll note that there is a lovely close-coupled drilling so that the strap pulls straight down with no encumbrance against the side of the case. Throw it on the wrist, the watch is remarkably slim. Under 12 millimeters thick, the watch will easily slip underneath the cuff. Broad and butch. It's also a very masculine choice from a brand typically known for its dress watches. So if you want to muscle up a little bit with Moser, this is the way to go. Now, Moser, of course, primarily known for the dress watches, and we have a great one right here. A model that came out in 2018 in 60 pieces in white gold. This is the 42 millimeter Endeavour Flying Hours. Now it uses the HMC 806, so you get a rose gold rather than tungsten rotor, so that's an upgrade in materials spec. You can see free sprung with a full balance bridge for shock resistance. You get those same black polished screws and double crested Côte de Genève. A manufacturer 3-day automatic, but it is the dial, which is a take on the ancient wandering hours complication, and you could see the 00 leads, and so the 00 selects the hour and then indicates the minute. The minute will stream by the hour, so you can see, for example, right now I can see that it is 6:10. Now it's 6:20. Now it's 6:30, and as you can see, shortly before the changeover, the next hour becomes visible. And so you can just play with this watch all day. It too features that blue fume dial that fades from a sort of cobalt metallic at its center to black at its edge. But this is the Endeavour case, which is like a piece of molten metal drawn out and flash frozen. It still seems to have that lovely compound curved fluid form with a bezel that's broader at its base and its top than it is at its center, and those lovely concave mirror polished evacuated lugs with a teardrop taper, and as you can see, vertical satin finish in the center for contrast. A very special watch, and this one only 12.3 millimeters thick. You can see it fits easily on the wrist. It wears comfortably. If you can wear a modern 40 millimeter Rolex, you can wear this, and you can see how those lugs really arc around my wrist. A very, very, very impressive piece. And again, only 60 of those made with the blue dial and 60 of those made with the green dial, so not many of those extant in the world as of 2020. Speaking of German speakers, we need to jump across the border one more time to Glashutte, and this finishes off our Teutonic segment for the night. A lovely slate anthracite gray Glashutte Original PanoMaticLunar, caliber 90, automatic winding, and as you can see, a combination of a moon phase with a double-digit date, and then on the reverse side, the extraordinary 3/4 rotor, caliber 90, with its double engraved duplex balance bridge and swan's neck adjustment system. Black polished swan's neck, hand engraved balance bridge, 3/4 rotor, 42-hour power reserve, and a 3/4 style bridge underneath that pocket watch style to remind you we are in Glashutte. A watch that's also easy to wear, 40 millimeters in stainless steel. This is a sporty dress watch, so this is not something you need to wear a tuxedo to take outside. This is a watch you can easily wear shorts and a t-shirt if you please. As I often say, the man makes the watch, not the other way around. And now, to finish off our segment for the night, a watch that can speak for itself. We first saw the FP Journe Repetition Souveraine in 2008. In 2009, the watch was launched, 40 millimeters in exquisite, sonically conducive stainless steel. Very special. This is the Repetition Souveraine. 8.65 millimeters thick. It's like a blade on your wrist, with 2 patents that help to reduce the size of the chiming complication. You can see the black polished hammer on the dial side. Underneath, you have a compact repeater mechanism. That's the first patent, a compact repeater. The second is a scythe-shaped repeater gong that helps to improve the sound, yes, but also reduce the packaging requirements. As you can see, caliber 1408 on the underside is basically the CS Chronomètre Souveraine caliber 1304, 18 karat rose gold bridges and plates, 56-hour power reserve, 2 barrels. You can see there is a power reserve indicator on the dial side. The dial is silver with blue printed numerals, indices, and graphics. The watch is exceptionally slender at under 9 millimeters thick, and you can see that the entire movement with the complication is only 4 millimeters thick inside the watch. Now, being unusual in stainless steel, and that solely for its sonic properties, the watch is also unusual in its inclusion of a full deployant clasp, uncommon on Journe watches. Only here, it's made of stainless steel to match. Throw this watch on the wrist, and you can see it is truly something special. Discretion par excellence, a timepiece that fits underneath any cuff, a stainless steel watch in 40 millimeters, a compact complication, a brand that connoisseurs know, and for the most part, most people who would be gawkers simply don't. From one of the fastest rising brands, there are 3 top dogs at FP Journe. There is the new Sidereal, there is the late great Grand Sonnerie, and then there is the Repetition Souveraine. And while you can get the watch in black label form, I prefer it in this form right here with the blue accents and the silver dial. A glorious piece, and again, an apex complication from one of the great brands in watchmaking. I'm going to set the watch a few hours ahead and allow you to see some of the visuals associated with the chiming. So it's not going to be quite as loud because it's not against my mic, but you can see the striker on the dial side and the governor. And that is how a minute repeater gets it done.
Get her done, as they say. Guys, thank you so much. As ever, prices in the description, names and references in the description, and tmosso at thewatchbox.com, the direct purchase and pricing question line for watches you see here or anywhere on my social media and Watchbox reviews. Thank you so much. Great work on the camera, Andrew. Good job on the switcher. Sean, time out, Tim out, and thank you for logging on.